Welcome to today's TJHD Talk session on behalf of the Toby Center and the Mishpacha Foundation. Our guests, Alla, Christoph, and Tana, will share their personal perspectives about the anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist campaign instigated by the Polish Communist government in March 1968, forcing more than 15,000 Polish Jews to emigrate. What happened in its immediate aftermath, and what has been its long-lasting impact? The conversation will last approximately 50 minutes, followed by a brief Q&A, and we invite you to put your questions in the chat section. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to the director of the Mishpacha Foundation, Patricia Dołowe. Patricia, we are delighted that we have this opportunity to join together. Please share a brief information about the foundation and what inspired you to create it.
Mishpacha Foundation was found to protect, to archive Jewish life in Poland. This Jewish life after 1968.
Sorry, but I cannot hear you.
Oh.
Okay. Continue. We'll
okay.
fix it.
The life after 1968, which is not so obvious. We have some archives talking and documenting our previous Jewish life in Poland, but not after 1968. And foundation was found by members of a Jewish community from Poland and also abroad, those including immigrants 1968 who are very much engaged in renewing Jewish life in Poland now.
Thank you. So you've set the scene, and please start with the questions to our guests, and let us dive right in.
This is very, very nice to see you all, and I will turn my question first to all of you, maybe starting with Alla. So my question to three of our guests is how your life looked like in Poland before 1968. In terms of your Jewish identity, was it important or maybe completely not? How it was in your families till this time?
Okay, so the Jewish identity before 1968. I was living in Warsaw since 1953 because my parents were in Wrocław and then.
Sorry, but I cannot hear anything.
You cannot hear? So what do we do about that?
No, but the rest hear you. You should talk, and then we start to think what to do with.
Oh, okay. I lived in a family on a very privileged street that turned out after 68 to be a very Jewish street, but the Jewish identity was not present until high school because my older sister started joining the organization or the site that was called I don't even remember, and she brought the Jewish identity into our house, but it wasn't the issue, if I may say so. We were just a family with a large number of friends of my parents and our own, and open house, and so it wasn't the issue. For me, the issue started after 68.
And if I can just ask maybe Tana now, how it looks in your family and in your environment.
Well, my family, Szymon and Maria Jakubowicz, they wanted to bring us as Poles because they were communists, and they decided that we are not going to express our Jewishness. But I decided to discover, and in 1996, I decided to broke into my father's desk and get the papers, and finally, I found out that we are Jewish. I felt it. I had intuition, but I was so excited and so relieved that I know. So I had only 3 years to search for my identity before 68. And in 68, I felt really initiated because I was taking part in the strike at the university. I was close to Adam Michnik and studying psychology, third year of psychology, and I was really involved. And I was shocked when the police and 8 other agents, entered the university, and I was beaten because I was trying to protect my dean of the school of the university, and they beat me and I lost my how to say przytomność.
Consciousness.
Yeah, I lost consciousness. So anyway, then afterwards I felt really initiated into my Jewishness, and I started looking for my roots, for my ancestors, and so on and so on. So my parents had to finally, realize that because they suffered also, they were thrown out of their works, having high positions in so then we all knew the situation.
Yeah, we will talk also about it later, about the consequences of 1968 itself. March 1968 itself. But as I understand, that was not really like a Jewish family. I mean, you know something, but actually that was not the issue, as like in Ala's case.
Well, it started to be the issue after 65 when I discovered. And they were also relieved, and they went to Israel they started to talk, because before there was a taboo. Mm-hmm. So I liberated their Jewishness.
Right. So it was just before. Right. Thank you. And Christoph, can you hear us now? Uh-oh. Christoph is still can't hear us.
So let me just check in for a moment. Dear guests and dear audience, there seem to be some technical glitches. We will continue with the conversation, and we will circle back to Christoph, who we're delighted to have, as soon as possible. So, Patricia, if you could start the second round, we'll come back to make sure we fill in the gaps.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so Tana started to talk a little bit about 1968, and I stopped her before telling about consequences, because this is something which actually is now I'm thinking of it, how it was, how it influenced you, how it impacted you, was it something that you spoken at home, or maybe not, or how it was in your home, Ala?
Well, I think they're a little bit similar to Tamna's. It was grew up in a family. My father was a socialist from Lviv, from before the war. He survived in the Soviet Union. My mother was brought up in Łódź in an assimilated family, but went to a Jewish school. So of course she knew her roots, but it wasn't the issue. It wasn't the topic of the conversation. The topic of the conversation started when my sister Majka started coming home, and what is called in Polish żydłaczyła, which is this tone of expression that is a little satirical way of speaking the language with and it brought our mother to, actually she was angry about that because she was very fond of the Polish language and she really didn't want anything to spoil it. But it wasn't the issue in a way that we discussed it, that it was the topic. The friends who came our house were Jewish, which was not the issue at all. So the theme of Judaism or being Jewish actually didn't affect us. I was not in Poland in '68, and I will come back to it because that's where I was awakened to the issue of being Jewish and the roots and the antisemitism.
So what were the consequences of March 1968? What happened to you then? What was your fate?
After high school, I went to Cuba to study, and I was in Cuba. I was in Havana when March '68 happened, and we were invited to the Polish embassy, and I was able to read the papers, and all of a sudden I read that most of our friends and most of the friends of my parents had different names. And I learned that actually my father changed his name as well. So that's how I learned that people were still hiding their identity and their ethnicity after the war. And this was the impact for me. I came back in '68 in July, and I couldn't come back to Cuba. And I started looking for a job, and I couldn't get a job. I couldn't go to the university because I was the daughter of my father, and everybody knew that my father was Jewish. And from a very early age, I wanted to be a psychologist. So the idea of not being able to fulfill my dream was actually the main issue for me when I decided to leave.
I turn this question to Tana. You started a little bit about that. Can you please tell us how it was after the campaign?
Right. So I said I felt initiated, and I started to really get interested into searching for our roots, and so I went for the retreats in Auschwitz-Birkenau, sitting there with a large group of people of different religion, culture, different spiritual traditions, and went deeply into bearing witness. And so I felt I have to really feel what they went through, and most of the family, of course, was annihilated in the camps and in Warsaw Ghetto and in Katyn. So I really went into it, and I decided to act for the process which is called Tikkun Olam, mending the world, through the process of leading the groups during Jewish Culture Festival on Kazimierz, Krakow. And I was really involved in meeting the people from different paths, different ways of life, Poles, Jews, French, whatever, they came from all over the world. And we were doing so-called open meetings, so people could really share their feelings, their memories, their attitudes towards the Holocaust. There were some Holocaust survivors there, so we went deeply into really setting the platform of reconciliation between people of different religious background and different nationalities and so on.
But that was a little bit like later, right? So just if you can just make one step earlier, we have 1968,
Right.
and what happened to you? What is your decision? What is your parents' decision about staying or leaving?
All right. As I said, my parents lost their jobs, so they finally realized that the system they built, it's not really good for Jews. They were really believing, they were hard believers that they're building the just system for all minorities and so they changed their attitude, but they decided not to leave, especially my father, who was really involved in workers' work, and he was really socially involved. He said, "This is below my dignity to be kicked out of the country." So I believe, my first decision was being loyal to him, and but this is kind of the mystery, because when I went to France in '69, all the family which left Poland in 20s came to Paris to beg me to leave Poland. They wanted to arrange all my life, wherever I wanted to go, the country, the husband, the home, everything. They would arrange everything to save me from this terrible, terrible country. So I still decided to, I was born in Paris, so I could easily, stay there. I was marrying American citizen, so I could go to the States. And for some reason, I was always coming back.
Thank you, Tana. Helis, have we got Christoph on our?
Unfortunately, Christoph is not with us, so I will take your role. I will take it for you if you hand it over, and we'll include some of the questions to you as the daughter of people who made decisions. And so far, Tana and Alas, we're really grateful for your honest answers. I may remind, Tana made a comment on one of our Facebook promotions. I had the chutzpah to stay.
Right.
I really think that I think that resonates from what you and Ala have been saying. So let's see if we can move a little bit farther in to. We now know where you were before. We know how you began to figure out who you were and what you could talk about, and you realizing, I imagine, that your parents had been holding on for dear life to save you or spare you any further pain. And so as a child, if you were both children when it happened, what happened at that point? It sounds like in some ways your Jewish identity was sparked, or maybe even, I don't even know, maybe even fueled, by this anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist campaign. What happened to your Polish identity?
Talking to me?
Yes, Ala, please start.
Okay.
No, Ala.
Ala.
I was afraid that this will be one of the questions.
You can say
Actually, one of the things that made me very different from my friends, both from the street and from school, was that I was very opposed to any kind of patriotism.
Okay.
Any kind of patriotism, any kind of nationalism, and for me, I didn't like Sienkiewicz. I didn't like this kind of literature. For me, the literature that I liked was Żeromski, which is much broader, much more humane, and so of course I was brought up in Poland. Polish was my language, but I never had the idea of the identity, Polish identity. And actually, I think that compared to my sister, for example, who has a very, very Jewish identity, my identity, and I think I share my psychologist colleague in the forum, my identity is tikkun olam. And my identity is my work, my job, my education, to be a psychologist, to help everybody, everyone, no matter where they come from. And that's how I lived my life. But Polish is my language. Polish is definitely my language.
Ala, thank you. You're opening up this prison box. Tana, that's what you both do. That's actually what we all do in different ways, but absolutely. Tana, your Jewish identity was emerging. Some of it, I think, was chutzpah, clearly. Some of it was what we call, I imagine, the phrase, a pintel yid, a little bit of Yiddishkeit in all of us, no matter whether we choose to identify it or expose it. So what happened at that point after your parents decided to stay? What happens to your feeling of Polishness?
Well, I never felt really Polish, or I felt between Polish or Jewish, because it took me a while to really identify with Jewishness, because I needed to meet with my friends, Kostek Gebert, Staszek Krajewski, and many others, Rysia Zachariasz, and they introduced me into, we first went to the synagogue with Kostek, with little children, and, the old Jews were saying, who are you? Where are you coming from? Where have you been when you haven't been here? And what's your name, Jakubowicz? And why didn't you, come earlier? Did you come from Israel? So it was really, I was really, kind of disoriented, but I never became the religious Jew, because I was already practicing Zen Buddhism, and I found out that many of my Zen teachers who came to Poland were Jews. So that's interesting. And in starting practicing and studying mystical Judaism, I realized that there is a higher order which made me to stay in Poland, because that was kind of my karma, or kind of my destiny, my calling to be here as a psychotherapist and work with people. So I really set on this Tikkun Olam activity to kind of help people to liberate from this hatred and contempt, and and fear, and all of this, which was our legacy after Holocaust. And I really believe, and that we need some spiritual renewal to overcome this old resentments and this intolerance, xenophobia, and so on. So I'm working on this level with people.
Tana, thank you. Patricia, can we have
Well,
you?
I didn't expect at this new role.
Well, let me just ask you a question, so we'll sort of direct it. As a second generation, I would say, if we can say it like that, how did you process, learning that your parents decided to stay, and where you chose to opt in to Jewish life in Warsaw, in Poland today?
Right. This is very, very interesting question, and of course, I was asking these questions to myself many times. What is really interesting also is that the term you used, you said you were the second generation. I always was first generation because I was first generation after the Holocaust, and now I'm second generation after 1968. That's true. That I mean, in my parents in my parents' families, that was exactly like maybe not exactly, but I can see the similarities between my parents' families and Ala and Tana, because in their homes there was also no really like very Jewish things. The truth is that, I mean, they were not religious at all. They were not really holding traditions. But for example, they had something in my father's house. They had something which was very Jewish. It was bridge evenings, and they were meeting and talking, and they were even talking about the experience of the Holocaust. That was this very safe space in which they could talk about it. So. From one side, you really, I mean, from for example, from my father's perspective, that wasn't really like Jewish home. He did know nothing about being Jew. As maybe there was one thing he remembered from his childhood, that he came back from the yard and he said, "Well, Mom, these boys called me Jew, and what does it mean?" And my grandmother, she answered, "Well, because you are so smart, so probably that's why." So that was it, and of course, so that's how it looks. So one thing is that it was really like a circle of other Jewish people around, but no really Jewish identity in this homes. But then in 1968, this consciousness arose, because suddenly they started to talk about it. They started to think, or to stay or to leave, and that was exactly the conversation in my parents' families, or to stay or to leave. And yes, as you said, they decided to stay. So I'm now the second generation of those one who decided to stay in Poland. But I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, actually, because then when they were very engaged in this underground. So they were also like Tana. They were at strikes, and they were really against government, and they still trying to be engaged, but then in 70s they because my father got the fellowship, they were able to go to United States. There is where I was born, and again. 2 years, I mean, 2 years for them, but only a few months for me later, they decided again that they will get back to Poland. So I'm still the second generation of those one who always stayed here, who was connected to Polish ground.
Patricia, thank you. So many questions come to mind, and you've all touched on so many aspects, including the idea, the concept, the Jewish concept of tikkun olam, of fixing the world, but not just in terms of what's around us, but ourselves and our families, to come to terms with, if it's possible, or adjust to. And so my next question is, and I'm sorry that Krzysztof was unable to connect. People who immigrated or were forced to immigrate, as I understand it, some have decided to return, and some of their children have also decided to see what it means to be a Polish Jew, or the children of Polish Jews who lived most of their rest of their adult lives in large outside of Poland, in places like Denmark or Sweden or Israel or the United States or France. So perhaps you three could sort of share some thoughts about what motivates people to come back. I think the concept of home is incredibly powerful, and the three of you have really been very clear about this concept of we are home. So maybe if you could share with our audience a few of your ideas or understandings of people who've decided, like Krzysztof and others, to come back to Poland in 1989 or since 1989, when Poland regained its independence. So Ala, can we start with you?
Well, from 1980, I was able to come back to Poland.
Okay.
My mother was still alive. My mother actually, my mother was just like Tuvim. She was Polish because that was her choice. So when she started talking about her war experience, it was actually, she was in Denmark visiting in 1981, and she couldn't go back because it was martial law.
Martial law, right.
And she was lost and she was unhappy. And she was invited actually by some friends, my friends, and they asked her, and this was the very first time, they asked her, where were you during the war? We had no idea. She was already 62 years old. And she started talking and she never stopped. And this was, then I started going to Poland and visiting her and reconnecting with her friends and my friends, etc., etc. So I was in touch with Poland very often, also as a psychologist, as a matter of fact, and later on as well. But I never thought of going back because my psychologist career was partially in the US and partially in Denmark, and I couldn't, and it was very early. Psychology was not, psychotherapy was not a part of the Polish culture yet. So this is the main reason why I didn't go back, because this is who I am. And I'm still working, so this is very important. But I used to go and I used to visit, and then I used to work with different institutions also, Zoom or not.
Zoom or not, you presume. In person.
Yes, yes.
Ala, thank you for bringing up, your reasoning, sharing your reasoning, and also how it seems that at some point your mother was liberated by something and was able then to share information about her and her life that you had never had access to. Tana, you're nodding your head. So I want to address perhaps that issue to you, as well as why people choose to come home, or of course, visiting is not precluded. People can visit, of course, but I don't know, do I want to say repatriate themselves? I'm not sure that's the word I mean, but coming back to Poland. Please share your thoughts.
Okay, I lost all my shtetl when they left. My friends, my students, colleagues from the university. I just lost almost all of them, and sometimes they were coming back just to visit, with nostalgia, with some, yearning for the climate of Poland, their home, So, but most of them just really found their new homes abroad, and they were coming, as I say, like for 50th anniversary of March, they all came back,
Yeah.
and we met at the university campus, and it was very, very moving. And we recognized each other,
Nice.
all in each other's arms, and but they just came for this
For
to
that.
really feel the atmosphere and share their feelings. And so leading this open meetings at Jewish Culture Festival, I met many people who came back because led by desire to find their home again. And they were coming back and but couldn't establish themselves. There was too difficult because the antisemitism was rising, and now we have a peak of this crisis. So it's really difficult to set back in Poland. And now, for instance, I'm 80 years old, so for me it's too late. But I'm thinking about my children and grandchildren.
Yes.
We don't know what's going to happen, right? And so I'm encouraging them to think about it. That if they could choose, another country to be safer, which is risky, but this is a very difficult question. Where to really be. I found my place here because I'm still working with people and being psychotherapist, and supporting people and making this reconciliation meetings. But it's for most people it's just very, very difficult to decide.
Thank you, Patricia. I'm just going to tweak that question. I'm going to tweak that question for you for a second. And you, in your work through being an author and an artist and a theater person, your work formerly as the director of the JCC and now at Polin, you see many facets of Jewish life in Warsaw today, certainly built on the shoulders and courage of those who stayed in Poland. And I'm grateful, if I may say a personal note, I'm grateful to Tana and many of the people she mentioned, because they welcomed me with open arms and have embraced me in the Polish Jewish community. So I'm asking you, with all your hats, but as a mother, how did these institutions and options change how people may feel about now staying, which seems to me many of us are staying, but where does that come in today's conversation, which Tana sort of, ignited?
Yeah, thank you for this question. This is something I was really thinking about many times recently. Yes, so actually one of important thing you said is that this appreciation for those people who stayed, and usually we are not really thinking about them, because that was the heart of being in hideout. And they were, like Tana said, they come secretly to the synagogue, and those people, where were you before? So that's exactly this atmosphere from those times. But actually, those are those people who build this base for Jewish life today. And then, of course, the next generation. So including my generation, and now
exactly.
children. And what is I think that today the situation is really look more happier for Jewish community. I think the Jewish community, especially in Warsaw, where there is some of us. I mean, there's a number. We could think about ourselves. We can think about ourselves that we are the community, that we are doing something together, and we are building something together. That we have connections. That we are not in hideouts anymore. That we could see each other not only from the distance, but really being close and have relationships, have bonds, and be also supportive for each other. So I think this is very, very important in these times we are living now, and this is something what we are trying to build here in Poland. I was trying to do that as a JCC, and still continuing this as Mishpucha Foundation now, and in Polin, that we as a Jewish community here, we really have many generations together, many voices. We are diverse, we are vibrant, and we can support each other. And I think this is absolutely different environment for my children. In terms of being Jewish in Poland, and I believe that this is also quite when I'm thinking about the world around Poland. Maybe this is ironically, but really is a safe place for Jewish people now. Sorry for that, but yeah, I mean, this is how it looks. So this is I'm thinking about it in different way. I can see also. Can I? Oh no! I will give voice to Ala, but also I can see here at the chat very interesting question about Polish citizenship, and I think this is important maybe to ask these questions then, because this is very much about people who left Poland and how they felt they felt and feel still about that. But because Ala is one of those,
right. Let's spin it off to Ala, because she was
exactly.
And Ala, please.
I just wanted to comment on the title of Mishpucha, because for me, this is the most Jewish thing. This is Mishpucha. We can go around the world, and going to one Jewish place to another, we are at home. And I have to say that living in Scandinavia for years and years, I often hear from my Danish friends that we are special, because when I travel in the world, I can stay with friends. And this is very unusual. And my parents' home was open to everyone, both their generation and my generation. So for me, the upper value of the Jewish life is Mishpucha.
Thank you for your beautiful and eloquent comment. I think that to bounce off of that, friends become family. And so that mishpocha is just the sense, or mishpacha in Hebrew, but mishpocha, that sense of we're all family. And you're right, wherever we travel, we have a home. I would like now, we're coming close. I'm not ready to stop, and I have no doubt that our audience is just warming up as well. I've been thinking a little bit about the fact that in a week's time, actually a week from tonight, we will celebrate Pesach, the holiday of Passover, and there's a commandment that we should tell our children about. We should tell and retell the story of leaving Egypt. In addition to the story itself, it basically gives us where are our roots from as a people, right? It's our family mishpocha story. I mean, it starts earlier, obviously, but so I guess what my question is, given where we are in time, given where you are in your lives, and generations, your generations and your generations and your children's and now your grandchildren, what is the story that you want them to have? What is the story about the question was, one question in the chat was, why did Poles stay or come back to Poland and stay after the Shoah and World War II? And clearly your parents, your grandparents, for whatever reason, made that choice. So I guess very quickly, what is the Haggadah that you want your children to have?
Okay. I was thinking about this Pesach coming very soon, and we'll be celebrating together, because, as you said, community is so important. Our ties, our connections, our love to each other is so wonderful, and I really wish everybody, Jews and non-Jews, that we liberate from this slavery of our minds, which are, so, to liberate from prejudice, to liberate from contempt, to liberate from the fear, and to really open and disarm our hearts, so we can pass to the next generations, our children and grandchildren, not the legacy of of fear and hatred and separation, and the really real wisdom and beauty of our spiritual traditions, to really free our minds from this old resentments, and for every person in the world, they have a right to live, and they have a right to live here among us. So to make the space, to open the space for all people, and be really, tolerant and full of respect. So that's my message, and that's what I'm trying to convey to my children and grandchildren.
Thank you, Tana. Ala.
I think, as I listen to Tana, I am thinking about one person who had a message, and unfortunately he cannot convey the message, so I'm going to do it for him, and it's Marian Turski. And it's a little bit in this to continue Tana's statement. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, and don't be indifferent, because the world is changing, and we have very limited influence. So where we are, where you are, don't be afraid, and be kind to other people.
Thank you. Patricia, what's your Haggadah? What is your story that you're sharing?
I didn't expect that I'd be also the one. I'm not, the grandpa.
But you're both a third, as you said, you're a third generation and a second generation, and somehow maybe a first. So, as a mother, let's say.
Yeah, I think what my friends said before me, that was really the important message I would also like to share and to give my children, as well as those one about homes all around the world. What Ala said about our mishpucha, and I must say that that was also, for me, it was always important that I can see, even in those times where we were not so much conscious about being in Jewish community, because we were still living in the hideouts. When I was a child, we knew that we are Jewish, but it was still something unspoken. And even those days, I remember this thin little lines, like, that we could see the connections between each other, that I could recognize that there is this other family who has the same or the similar story as my family story, that we are not alone. And I think that this is very, very important, that we should have this always those people around and feel that we are not alone in this world. You will never walk alone, right?
Well, I'm very. I know we all regret that Krzysztof had problems on his end to connect, and his story and his comments. But I want to thank him. But I want to thank you, Ala and Tana, and of course Patricia, for joining this conversation. And I'm touched and moved, and I'm sure our audience is, because you're bringing out some important information, truths, and fighting against fear, as you said, and fighting against not knowing, fearing. Does the outside tell us who we are, or do we tell ourselves and the outside who we are? And I know, unfortunately, every country is experiencing antisemitism, and Poland is unfortunately on the list. But as Patricia said, I guess I want to conclude with this hopeful message, because we are hopeful and forward thinking that now, 30 plus years later, 37 years, in some ways, we're a very young community, even though we have ancient roots. We are new shoots. And this being a young country and a young Jewish community with both burdens and a treasure of heritage that we carry, I see that we are part of Poland, and we're part of Europe, and we're part of the global Jewish table. So I would like to conclude, again, thanking our speakers, thanking our audience. Thank you for bearing with some of the technical difficulties. I'd like to thank those people behind the scenes that people rarely see, but without them, Jakob Wyszak and Kaya Sichek, we wouldn't be here. And to thank all of you again, audience. This program, which is now in its 5th year, depends solely on your donations. And if you'd like to donate or make it in memory or in honor of someone, we'd be grateful. Information about how to do that and how to keep up with more of our work, including, of course, TJHD Talks, will come in an email to follow. So my conclusion is, may we all celebrate Pesach and the Easter holiday in a meaningful and sweet way, and may it be peaceful everywhere. Thank you, Dobranoc.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to meet you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
The mishpocha just got bigger.